It's another Wednesday, and I'm so pleased to have the amazing Tyler Lowe with me. We've been talking about a number of areas of wellness, and one area we haven't touched, Tyler. And hello, Tyler, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. And yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. We've talked quite a lot about a number of things. Um, One thing we haven't touched on is stress.
Hmm.
I don't even like the word stress. I call it the silent killer. It just creeps up on you, and before you know it, you're unwell. You don't even know why you're stressed. It just creeps up on you, and I'm just really interested, especially with this episode, on how we can create habits to deal with stress. How do we
Yeah.
block it from the door? You're very, very open about the fact that prevention is better than cure. And yes, I had a little trigger in my life, and so I made that change. Your ethos is to not have those triggers. Your ethos is to get to a point of life where you're so grateful for what you have, you want to protect it and nurture it. But stress does have a habit of creeping up on us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, stress is a massive thing. I mean, the UK statistics, 49% of working days lost in the UK are due to stress, depression, and anxiety, which is quite high. And that was the statistics from last year. And I mean, I've been looking at these for the last 5 or 6 years, and they've hovered around about 50% over that period of time. And that could, in theory, be higher because who likes to tell their boss they're not coming to work because they're
Absolutely.
stressed, right? It might
Absolutely.
be easier to say, I've got food poisoning or
Yes.
some other excuse, right?
Is
So
it
that,
embarrassing to say that you're stressed? Does that give the impression generally that we can't cope?
well, potentially to some people may feel that it's much easier to give another reason as to why they're taking time off work. Um,
I
yeah,
noticed as well that you put under this umbrella stress, depression, anxiety. They're
yeah,
three very, very powerful words that are not
mm,
positive,
no,
but are grouped together
yes,
and affect so many areas of our wellness. Stress, depression, anxiety can affect you financially,
yes,
physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It can affect how you balance your time. They're three, I'm going to say, offensive words.
mm,
They're so real in our lives at the moment, aren't they?
yes, and they have a knock-on effect to each other. So we really want to implement the things that can help us to reduce those feelings. We want to implement, as you mentioned, habits that can help us to reduce our stress, reduce the negative emotions that we might be feeling throughout our day. And I guess today we're going to touch on how we can implement habits that help us to reduce our stress. But I guess I want to start by saying everyone is an individual and you have to find what works for you. For me, one of the things that really helps alleviate my stress, I love to exercise and play sport. I play football once a week and I like to go boxing. These are things that really help me in my life. So for someone else, it might be reading a book. It
Yep.
might be going for a walk. It might be listening to music. There are lots of different ways, lots of different healthy coping methods that we can all use to help us cope with our stress.
Mm.
But I guess to understand how we can help implement habits, there's something called the habit loop that can help us create things that help us to create positive habits
Yeah.
that can have a knock-on effect in our life. And the habit loop consists of three stages. We've
Okay.
got the cue, the routine, and the reward. Now, the cue is the thing that prompts you to take part in the action. The routine is the habit itself. And the reward is the satisfaction that you get from that habit. And in order to create habits that can help us, first we need to identify a routine. So what is relevant to us? Like I said, for me, it's boxing. To you, it's your morning walk.
Yeah.
For someone else, it might be yoga, reading a book, like whatever. So
Yeah.
identify what is the habit that you want to implement. Then experiment with the reward. What is the benefit that you get from taking part in that habit? For me, it's the mood that I feel, the benefit in how I feel physically and mentally. And we also need to find a strong cue, something strong enough that prompts us to take action. So again, for me, I'll just use my example here, going to boxing, for example. I have friends that also go to the boxing gym that I go to, and we commit to going at that time. You know, I have other people that, yeah, go at that time. So that prompts me to make sure that I go each week. Equally with football, those are the things that prompt me. But for someone else, it might be a picture on their wall of the holiday that they're going on, to prompt them to take action. So to start with a new habit, we need to implement those three things. Identify the habit that we want to do, create a strong cue, and experiment with the reward.
Cue, habit,
Routine.
cue, routine, reward. I like.
So,
We will definitely put that in the description beneath this video. Have you noticed, Tyler, stress levels amongst all people have just risen in the last 2 to 5 years?
I mean,
We're not going to talk about COVID because
yeah.
we know that. Generally, are you finding this?
Because of my line of work, excluding COVID, stress is still a big impact, especially in the working environment. And the one of the biggest causes of stress is workload. Having too much on, having too much to do, having workload that is unmanageable. And that is one of the biggest contributors to those feelings of over being overwhelmed and those feelings of stress. And actually, I touched on the data earlier about 49% fitting of working days lost because of the three power negative power words we mentioned. But on average, each sufferer takes off approximately 19 working days off. So if you take time off because of those symptoms, approximately 19 working days off. So that's just under 4 weeks. So that's why we really need to tackle it before it happens. Because if you get yourself to a position, I can imagine your job role, if you had to take just under 4 weeks off, four unplanned weeks off work, what kind of impact would that have on everyone, right? It
Okay.
wouldn't be good. So finding ways to manage it and cope with it is essential. And as I mentioned, workload is one of the biggest contributing factors. And companies that support employees with their workload, having more manageable workloads, can
Yeah.
help reduce their stress.
But alongside having to take time off because of stress, depression, anxiety, if you have to take that time off, does it not increase the levels of stress, depression, anxiety? Because you take time off, you think, right, I've got myself a bit more balanced. But then to go back into the same environment that pushed you out because of being overworked, the stress, depression,
Mm.
it's just like being on it's what I call the hamster wheel syndrome.
Yeah.
So my daughter, when she was little, she had a hamster. This thing used to run about 50 miles a day, get off the wheel, and be in the exact same place where he started. So, how do we deal with this hamster wheel syndrome?
Mm. I mean, as individuals, I'll give some tips that individuals can do to help with their stress, because I guess individuals might not be able to control the amount of workload that
Yeah.
comes in. They might not be able to control those. So let's look at the things that we can control as individuals.
Yeah.
And I want to give a saying here, because stress is not what happens to you. stress is how you think and how you feel about what happens to you. And the reason we know this is true is because what I find stressful might not be stressful to you, and what you find stressful might not be stressful to me. We all react and perceive stress in different ways. Now, of course, there are things that we all typically as humans might get stressed about,
Yeah.
but there are varying degrees of our stress levels, right? I guess someone going on radio talking for the first time would be extremely stressed.
Yes. Yes.
But I imagine for you, that doesn't stress you out at
As
all.
much, as much. I
Yeah.
still get
Yeah.
nervous, and because
Yeah.
and I no, I still do. If you're not nervous, it means he doesn't care anymore.
Yeah.
Anymore. But I still, I still wonder. Oh my goodness, am I going to say this right? But I hear you. I hear you. Can you just repeat that sentence again?
Yeah.
Stress isn't what happens to you.
Yes. Stress is not what happens to you. Stress is how you think and how you feel about what happens to you. Now, I want to be very careful here because, like I said, we all get stressed out about different things, right? And it's very natural to feel stressed in specific circumstances, or, we're late for work, we might feel stressed.
Yes.
But we all know someone who goes through life and they don't seem to appear stressed, right?
Yes.
They seem to just coast through and nothing seems to phase them because they've learned to understand this concept and help it in their natural life.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to go into the
Yeah.
story because we'll be here
Yeah.
for another hour, but it's really interesting. Just when you were saying what somebody might be late for work, and they get stressed. I was always planning my day to be on time. Didn't account for traffic, didn't account for the tube not turning up, didn't account for the fact that the tube might be packed and I'd have to wait for another one. I always used to say, right, get there on time. And it was a very good friend of mine who was a therapist who said to me, when the tube is late, when you are in traffic, how are you benefiting from this? And she said to me, to cut down your stress level, why don't you plan to be half an hour early? Other people might be happy to walk into a meeting late because they see it as them making an entrance. It's about how things are perceived. So when you say it's not
Yes.
what happens to you, it's how you think what's going to happen to you. So I
Yes.
totally get that. Tyler, I have to ask you, and I know we're going to be rounding up this session very soon. Actually, I'm going to show you something that I think has stressed us out. I'm going to show it to you.
Mobile phones. Absolutely. Overwhelming mobile phones. It can be, yeah, very stressful. And one of the things that people can use, one of the things that I use, because, being a business owner, I have notifications on my phone, emails, whatever it is. And that can sometimes feel overwhelming, right? But I don't want to start my day feeling like that. So my phone sleeps in the living room when I go to bed. I go to bed, my phone goes in the living room. That means not only when I go to bed am I not being overwhelmed by the stresses of technology, but also when I wake up in the morning, I have an alarm clock that wakes me up. It means the first thing I grab isn't my phone, which can then overwhelm me and stress me out straight away, right? So technology can contribute to the stress, but how can you use technology to reduce your stress? What can you do? What apps can you delete
Yeah,
that you find overwhelming? I'm fortunate enough to have a tablet as well. So my social media, I don't have it on my phone because sometimes I can mindlessly scroll. It can stress you out or
yeah,
make you feel a certain way. So it's more intentional now that it's on a tablet. If I want to go on it, fine, I'll go on the tablet. I'm not picking up my phone just sporadically. Yeah. And I just want to just share a method about stress because we touched on it briefly and we haven't gone so in depth in habits either. But I mean, we could talk forever.
Oh gosh,
But
yeah.
you had a great way to reframe your stressful situation by looking at what are the benefits of this situation. And you found a way to reduce your stress in that way.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
want to give another method for your viewers to really help reduce their stress. And that's where we ask ourselves, what is at stake here? How can this harm me? And what can I do about it? Now, most of the time, not all, most of the time, when we experience a stressful situation, we perceive that situation to be worse than what it actually is.
Yeah.
Our initial reaction is the majority of the time an overreaction.
Yes.
But when we ask ourselves those three questions, it can help us to change our initial perception and see the situation for what it actually is. So, what is at stake here? I'm late on the tube. Right. I'm going to be late. I don't know what's at stake. How can this harm me? The majority of the time, actually, there's no danger to me whatsoever. And what can I do about it? Well, actually, there's nothing I can do right now. So, um, you know,
Yeah.
there's let's get on with life. Or if there is something you can do, it's helped you find a solution to help you deal with the stressor, right? So those are yeah, three questions you can ask yourself. As you mentioned, yeah, we're running out of time.
Yeah,
So
we are. We are. One last thing that I really want to touch on about phones, because I think they have become a part of our lives. Years ago, I would pick up my handbag, I'd pick up the car keys, I'd pick up an umbrella. The umbrella is now in the boot of the car. I pick up my car keys, I pick up my handbag, I pick up my phone. Children in schools are now learning. It's the phones and tablets are a learning tool. And because of some of the material that comes out on phones via certain apps, stress levels in children are starting much younger. That's
mm,
obviously having an effect on parents. So stress in the household is now much higher than it was some years ago. As a grown man, you've decided, right, I'm not having my phone in my bedroom. I'm very guilty of that because I watch Netflix at night. You put your phone in your living room. How can we encourage our children without just saying, look, give me the phone, go to bed? Because that's
yeah.
not the way. That's not the way to do it. How can we encourage our children just to spend less time on the phone?
Well, how can we inspire the younger generation to do things that don't use the phone? How can we give them that time, whether it's playing a board game, whether it's drawing a picture? How can we inspire them? These phones often have things that entertain us, right? So how can we talk to the younger generation and inspire them to not look at their phone? What can we do? Whether it's are we reading them a book? We need to work that out for our own circumstances and own environments. Every child's different, every household is different, but we need to find ways to inspire them to not want to be on their phone or TikTok or whatever it
Yeah,
is for
yeah.
however long.
Tyler, we could talk wellness on all levels for months, couldn't we?
Yes.
Mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, and also wellness in managing our time. Tyler, it's been such a great pleasure speaking with you. Do you want to let people know where they can find you, on what you do, whether you go into companies, do individual workshops?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I help companies support the health and well-being of their employees, typically through a range of in-person workshops or online webinars, help leadership with their team meetings. I do a whole range of things. You can find out more information on the website. That's lovinglifeco.com.
Tyler Lowe, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so, so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.